In terms of agenda, we have about 25 minutes of total presentation prepared for you today. I am joined by Trey Gould, Solutions Engineer at CloudFlare. All attendees are placed in listen-only mode. If you have questions during the session, type your question in the questions panel of the control panel and click Submit. To launch your question panel, find a little question mark at the bottom of the control panel. You may submit as many questions as you'd like at any time during the session. We will record today's session and post a copy of the recording on our video channel, www.youtube.com/Cloudflare. Now, let's get started. I am excited for our presenter, Trey Gwynn, who will take it from here. Trey, go ahead.
Hello, my name is Trey. I'm a solution engineer, as Ellie said, here at CloudFlare. I just want to check to make sure that you can see my presentation okay. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about DDoS and what we call our DDoS 101. The idea behind this presentation is to do an introduction to what is this thing called DDoS. We see it mentioned in the media, we see it shows up on the internet, on blogs, and what is DDoS? So the idea with this presentation is as a general introduction to what DDoS is, what kinds of DDoS there are, how Cloudflare deals with DDoS, and also to our call to action at the end of this presentation will be how you can make sure that your servers and your network aren't used as part of your servers aren't used to perform DDoSes on other people. So, kicking off, DDoS, what does it stand for? It stands for a distributed denial of service attack. This is an attack generally that comes from many locations, but that's the distributed part. And the idea with denial of service that it's supposed to just overwhelm your resources to perform some service, and it prevents you from serving legitimate customers. And so what we're trying to do is see how we can stop some of these DDoS services. But just to think about what is a DDoS attack outside of the world of cybersecurity and off of the internet. Well, how about fake pizza orders? Let's say you run a pizzeria that does delivery, and you have someone calling in fake pizza orders all over town. There's going to be you're going through all of your ingredients, you're eating up, going through all your pepperoni and your dough, and you're sending your drivers all over town to buildings that don't exist, and them being so busy stops them from actually producing pizzas for your real customers, which obviously negatively affects your business. So that's an example of how in a non-internet, off the internet, how you could a business could be DDoS, how their resources could be overwhelmed, so they're not able to serve legitimate customers. On the internet, there are a variety of DDoS attacks, and they sort of fall into three basic categories. Application level attacks. These contain things of when you're trying to exhaust resources of doing, let's say, a search on a website that is very expensive for your database server, and do a lot of those searches very quickly, which makes your database server busy, so then your website slows down and is not able to serve legitimate traffic. Protocol attacks are things that you may have heard of called SYN floods or the slow loris attack. These are attacks that look at lower level protocols on how browsers and how users connect to resources on the internet and try to overwhelm those resources so you can no longer have a number of connections. And then the last kind is volumetric. Volumetric are the hardest to deal with. They're pretty unsophisticated, but they're really effective. They're like a caveman with a club. These are the attacks where you just flood resources. So you flood the connection to the internet that your servers or your data center has, and you have such a flood of traffic that the servers and your data center can no longer access the internet, and your legitimate users can't get to your services. These volumetric attacks are some of the hardest to deal with because it's now possible to create such huge volumes of traffic that no one can actually absorb them in a single location, and/or it's prohibitively expensive to have an internet connection big enough to deal with these volumetric attacks. Now, at Cloudflare, we have dealt with the largest DDoS attacks in history, including a 400 gig attack, 400 gigabit per second of traffic. This was about 6 weeks ago, and previously we had dealt with what had been the largest attack in history up until then, as reported in the New York Times, which is an attack against SpamHouse. Now, SpamHouse has been kind enough to let us tell their story, so I'm going to go in and tell you the story about how the SpamHouse attack happened, and what we did to what we did to protect them from this volumetric attack. So SpamHouse is a service that lists spammers. This is a website that's used around the world by lots of parties to understand who they should blacklist. So this is basically a big global blacklist of spammers and bad actors on the internet. And as you can imagine, these guys, by keeping a list of the bad guys, are not at the top of the bad guys' Christmas list. So there were some attackers that didn't like being listed on the SpamHouse site, and they decided that they would do a volumetric attack against SpamHouse. So what did SpamHouse's website look like when they did that attack? This is what SpamHouse's website looked like to a valid user. They would go in and they would see, I'm unable to connect. And this is because SpamHouse's resources were exhausted by this false traffic. So then SpamHouse went and signed up on CloudFlare. And what we saw on Wednesday, last March 20th, was an attack that looked like this. So, it was a 75 gig attack. This is a big quantity of traffic. You can see that big spike in the green. It's a big spike in traffic, but it's actually not that uncommon for Cloudflare. We see attacks that break 100 gigabits per second on a weekly basis. And then there's this question about the 100 gigabit attack, sort of a magic ceiling in DDoS attacks. So it had been a magic ceiling in DDoS attacks. And the reason why is that in one single location, you can't actually get networking gear to deal with more than 100 gigabit of traffic. It's hard to find, on-premise solutions, boxes that can scrub traffic and deal with more than 100 gig of traffic. So you can even overwhelm these by just sending a large volume of traffic. So even though that you can throw away 99.999% of traffic, you're getting so much traffic that the network resources and the routers and switches are actually overwhelmed. Then moving past this sort of 100 gig attack, March 24th, March 25th, we see attacks that reached over 300 gigabits of traffic. And this is, at the time, rated as the largest DDoS attack in history. So we saw these really massive attacks. And so the question is how were they able to produce such huge quantities of traffic? Well, we're going to show you a DNS query here. dig is a command that you run to request DNS, request an answer to DNS. And anyone that's not familiar with DNS, DNS is sort of a phone book on the internet. And you'd say, I'm trying to find spamhouse.org, and spamhouse.org resolves to an IP address. Your browser connects to that IP address, and that's how you get to SpamHouse's servers and to their website. There's an interesting thing about DNS is that it runs over a protocol called UDP, and it allows me to it's a question and answer. So I could say my question is where is SpamHouse's website? And the answer is SpamHouse's website is at this such and such address. But if I were to be an attacker, I could ask a question along the lines of I would say, hi, my name is Trey. If I was being a valid user, I would say, hi, my name is Trey. Here's my question, and the answer would come back to me. Now, if I was going to be an attacker, I could send out lots of questions, and the questions I would say is, hi, my name is Ellie, and I'd like to know the answer to this question. And all these servers, because it's over UDP, they will actually respond with the answers to my question back to Ellie, even though she never asked it. So she gets this flood of answers, which can overwhelm her system. And so this is where the basis of these UDP-based attacks. So if we see this is a simple question, that question is only a 64-byte query. But the answer to that question is this massive block of text. And that massive block of text is the 3,300-byte response. So this is what we call amplification. The idea of asking a small question and getting a large answer. And then on top of that, what you want is you want that answer to go, to go towards your intended victim, the attacker's intended victim. In this instance, there was a 50 times amplification factor. So the answer was 50 times bigger than the question. So all the attacker has to do is create, let's say, for every 1 megabit of traffic they can create in questions, they have 50 megabit of attack traffic sent to their intended victim. And things to be aware of with attack amplification. The SpamHouse attack from last year was a DNS-based attack, and that was, you get around a 50x amplification factor. The NTP attacks that we've seen affecting lots of gaming sites, and that's actually led to our 400 gig attack from 2 months ago, uses the NTP protocol, the network time protocol. This is also a UDP-based attack vector, but it actually has a higher amplification factor. And then the things that we're concerned about seeing in the future are SNMP-based attacks. We think that we could see somewhere up to 650 times amplification factor with the based between the size of the question and the size of the response. And the issue, of course, is that this goes over UDP. On the internet, there are sort of two protocols. There's TCP and UDP. With TCP, if you want to establish a connection, I would say, hi, Ellie, this is Trey. I'd like to establish a connection with you. Ellie would come back to me and say, oh, hi, Trey, this is Ellie. Let's go ahead and start a connection. And then we can start to communicate. But because she's had to send a response, to acknowledge my request back to me, that's this three-way handshake with TCP. And that's what HTTP, web traffic and stuff flows over. But DNS and network time protocol, these use a protocol called UDP, and it's sort of fire and forget. So all I can do is just send a question. I just send a question, say, hi, this is Trey, I'd like an answer to this. And I just send it over the wall, and hopefully the answer comes back. So there's no handshake involved. But it also means that I could throw that question over the wall and say, hi, I'm Ellie, and I'd like this answer. And the answer actually gets sent back to Ellie. This is one of the challenges with a protocol like UDP. It's fast and efficient for video, but it can be misused in this way. So the problem ingredients. How is it that you can create these massive attacks? Well, there are two things that lead to these problem ingredients. One are the existence of networks that allow what's called source IP spoofing, and two, servers that reply to non-customers. So first off, what are networks that allow, what is source IP spoofing? Source IP spoofing is me sending a bit of traffic out saying, hey, I'm Ellie. But that bit of traffic that goes out from my computer is going to go through my ISP, and my ISP should know whether or not Ellie is a customer. So if my ISP sees a question going out into the world saying, I'm Ellie, and the ISP knows that Ellie is not a customer, it shouldn't allow that question to go out onto the internet. So that's essentially IP spoofing. And then on top of that, I'm then going to go, let's say, ask a DNS server for a response. And this is, I'm going to go look for, where's the IP address of that giant response we saw before off of the dig command. If I go, there are certain servers that are designed to reply to everyone on the internet, but in general, those DNS servers should really only respond to those customers that are essentially their customers. So if you have a DNS server in a corporate environment or an enterprise, it should really only reply to people that are within that enterprise, not to the internet as a whole. If you have a DNS server on an ISP, that DNS server should really only reply to those ISP's customers. You don't want it to reply just to the whole world. And the idea there is what we call an open resolver. So how common are these ingredients? Well, so good networks, as I said, don't let packets originate from them for IPs they don't own. So I shouldn't be able to send a request out, a question saying that I'm Ellie. This is what we call best common practice 38. It's not fully adopted yet, as you'll see. Unfortunately, not all networks are good. And we want to see how common are these ingredients of networks that are allowing spoof packets to come from them, and also how many of these open servers are there. Well, first off, how many open servers are there? We have projects that actually track these. So there is an open resolver project which sees 28 million open resolvers on the internet. So there are huge swaths of servers that are answering to anybody that asks them a question. And we should obviously see this number from 28 million be dramatically reduced because they're answering to essentially to non-customers. And when we talk about spoofing, where I'm able to send a request from a network, and I'm saying that I'm Ellie, even though that I'm not. How many networks stop me from doing that sort of request? It looks like actually about a quarter of networks on the internet would allow that. Unfortunately, a large portion of these networks that allow spoofing are corporate networks. So the sort of call to action is to see, if you run a network and or a DNS server or a name server, or DNS server or an NTP server, you want to make sure that your networks are not allowing spoofing and that you're not running an open resolver. And there are, as we saw, 28 million open DNS name servers, but there are also tens of millions of misconfigured NTP servers as well, the network time protocol. So anyhow, that's a lot of information, and if we want to, as for background, and what we're looking at now is how was it that an attacker, in this instance, who is just a teenager in the UK, they wanted to take out SpamHouse. All he had to do was have a single laptop where he took control of 5 to 7 compromised servers. He only accessed 3 of those networks on the internet that allow spoofing out of the 25% of networks, so of the tens of millions. He was able, on those compromised servers, to create 9 gigs of DNS requests, so 9 gigabits of questions, and all he had to do was go to 0.1% of open resolvers on the internet. So he produced 9 gigs of questions, and the answer was 300 gigabits of answer due to that amplification factor that we discussed. So you can see here the thing that's a little disconcerting about this is that he was only accessing 3 networks and 0.1% of open resolvers. So there's, he was barely scratching the surface for what is possible in producing huge quantities of attack traffic. So how do we stop it at CloudFlare? Well, the first thing CloudFlare does is we have built a global network. So we have data centers all over the internet and all over the world, and with very large capacity in every data center. Secondly, we run a thing that's called Anycast. On Anycast, you can see on the left side, Unicast is sort of the legacy way that things have worked on the internet, the way to work on the internet for a long time. The red dot is a browser, and the green dot is a website. So the idea with Unicast is there's essentially one website. The IP address for your website is in one place, and if you had lots of red dots, they would all connect to that same green dot on the left side for Unicast. With Anycast, you'll notice that there are now 3 green dots. So your website now exists in 3 locations. With CloudFlare, we run Anycast. So when a website is put on the CloudFlare network and available through a CloudFlare IP address, when a connection is coming from the UK, the website looks like it's in London. And when a connection is coming from Austin, Texas, it looks like the website is in Dallas. And when a connection is coming from Melbourne, Australia, the website looks like it's in Sydney, Australia. So the website appears to be in all of these places simultaneously. This is helpful for performance, but also in mitigating these large attacks. So this Anycast technology inherently dilutes these attacks. So if we go back to the very beginning, the first D in DDoS is distributed. The idea is that these attacks are coming from all over the world, and when the attack tries to attack a website, it's going to hit its nearest data center. So 300 gig attack, which is a very large attack, divided by 25 pops is only 12 gigabits of traffic per pop. That becomes a much more manageable size. And this is sort of the beauty of our Anycast architecture. It allows us to sort of distribute these attacks. If you try to deal with a 300 gig attack in one location, suddenly that one location has to have more than 300 gigabit of capacity. And then what we saw, 2 months ago, a 400 gig attack, you'd suddenly have to have a 400 gigabit of capacity in a single location. So you can see how the single location model doesn't scale well. With the Anycast model, we can build more and more POPs and stop the attacks closer to where they happen. So what's our call to action? Our call to action here at CloudFlare is to please make sure you're not part of the problem, because we really want to make the web a better place. Our motto is to save the web. So things to go look at is, are you running an open DNS resolver? Do a Google look for open resolver project, and you can type in the IP space, your IP addresses. If you run a business or you have your own IP addresses, you can see if there are any open DNS resolvers that you have, and then you can go and they can provide information on how to clean those up. The same thing goes for open NTP servers. There's an openntpproject.org, and you can go type in your IP addresses here and find out if there are any open NTP servers that they've discovered, and that you can go, they provided information on how to keep those. But the idea is you want to make sure that these servers that essentially are providing the answers are only providing answers to your customers, not to the internet as a whole. And in addition to that, if you run a network, you want to make sure that you implement BCP 38, the best common practice 38. You want to make sure that traffic coming from your network is actually only it's only possible that it was coming from your customers. You want to inspect that traffic and say, not allow questions, coming from myself, even though I'm saying it's coming from Ellen. And that is my presentation as a whole. I hope we've kind of kept relatively on time, and I appreciate everyone's patience and attention so far. What we're going to do now is look for questions. If anyone has any questions, please drop them into the Q&A box, and we can get to them. We'll actually be able to reply to you after this presentation. So feel free to submit questions here. But up until now, I just wanted to thank everyone for their time, and we look forward to answering any further questions as you submit them. And we wish you the best of luck. And please go to cloudflare.com and feel free to sign up for a free account or one of our paid accounts to try out our service. Have a great day.